Hi again, and welcome to the September session of BusinessWise Insiders. In a moment, I'll start the presentation. It'll run for about 25 minutes. And as Deborah mentioned, after that, we'll break into smaller groups where you'll get a chance to introduce yourselves and ask questions and share ideas about today's topic or anything else that might be on your mind. If you can, I would strongly encourage you to stick around for that portion, since that personal interaction and knowledge sharing are really what BusinessWise Insiders is all about, and it can help put the themes that we'll discuss today into a real-world context. As always, I'm going to keep everyone on mute just during the presentation portion of today's session. But if you have questions, either ask them in the chat window, and we'll try to get to them during the presentation, or you can save them for the breakout discussion. So today we're going to dig in to a question that I'm sure has crossed your mind once or twice over the past year or so since ChatGPT came on the scene last November. And that's, can generative AI tools like ChatGPT help you write your B2B emails? I'm not expecting that we're going to get a definitive answer to this question, because there really isn't one. AI technology is evolving extremely rapidly, and the output depends a lot on the input and the user's expectations for what it will produce. And I already know from experience that generative AI can absolutely help with certain aspects of the writing and creative process. But our goal today is a little bit different. What I really want to do is use ChatGPT to examine the key elements of email prospecting, to see where AI can help or where it falls short, and to identify how human sales reps should be thinking about their approach to lead gen in a world where AI is increasingly becoming a fixture. So to start the presentation, I wanted to bring you guys back to where I was when I started thinking about today's session and how to approach it. And I figured if we're going to be talking about whether ChatGPT can write an effective B2B email, then I should give ChatGPT the chance to write the invitation. And as I'm sure many of you already know, the art of crafting a prompt that you can feed into a generative AI tool is really an important part of this process. The quality and precision of what ChatGPT writes can vary widely depending on the prompt you provide. And on one hand, you want to provide as many specific details as are necessary to achieve the tone and substance you're looking for. And on the other, too many rules and details can end up bogging the technology down and sort of producing a convoluted result. So you can see here that what I used as a prompt for ChatGPT in writing this month's Insider's invitation. I obviously wanted to be clear that I wanted an invitation to a B2B sales webinar and about the central topic of the webinar, but I also wanted the invitation to embody some of the tensions that we'll be talking about today, which is, as an instruction, is a little bit more sophisticated. And I wanted to see what ChatGPT could do. And here's what ChatGPT came up with. Now, this isn't the exact invitation you all received. I tweaked it slightly to ensure that it was in the right format for our typical Insiders invitations, with the registration button and the right times and dates, but it's pretty close. Substantively, I wanted the invitation to come almost entirely from what ChatGPT wrote. And I have to say, it did a pretty good job. Not surprisingly, everything is clear and grammatically correct. More importantly, right off the bat, the invitation gets to the central question that I wanted to cover and offers a few bullet points to sum up the pros and cons of using AI. And then finally, it included a paragraph mentioning that the email was written by ChatGPT and asks readers to reflect on whether it did the job well or lacked a personal feel. However, I don't think we can declare the debate over just yet, because this kind of email, a fairly straightforward and impersonal event invitation, is really not representative of the kinds of emails that sales reps use to engage with their prospects. And here's a key distinction that I think we all need to keep in mind as we think about whether and how AI can help sales reps set more appointments with prospects. In the world of B2B sales, there are really two main categories of email lead gen. There's email marketing, which is more of an advertisement for your company or brand or geared toward specific kinds of content or events, just like our Insider's invitation. And then there's email prospecting, which is where sales reps are looking to make one-on-one connections and set first-time appointments with prospects. And that's a totally different ballgame. And since the vast majority of sales reps are engaged to a far greater degree in the latter, that's where our focus will be today. Whether and how ChatGPT can help you write effective prospecting emails where you're trying to make that human connection and start conversations. Before we do that, we need to take another step back. Previous Insiders attendees have heard us talk a lot about the 40-40-20 rule. We talk about it in relation to all aspects of sales and lead generation, and it helps us stay focused on the big picture. And it's the idea that the vast majority of your lead gen success comes from two basic concepts: your list and your offer. Your email message lives on the right side of this slide, the 20% that covers what you say and how you say it, and that's what we'll be looking at today. And this is a point I'll attempt to make throughout this presentation. Whether or not ChatGPT can help you write effective email prospecting campaigns, the fundamentals of successful business development have not changed and are not likely to change even through the advent of this technology and future technologies. And neither have the key elements of successful email prospecting changed. Whether the words come from your own brain or from a generative AI tool, your emails need to be clear, to get to the point, to sound human, and to offer value if you're going to use them to start conversations with good prospects. And before we see whether ChatGPT can make that grade in each of these areas, I just wanted to invite Deborah to offer any other introductory remarks for things we might want to keep in mind over the course of the presentation.
Thanks, Sam. I think we're asking everybody to do a little multitasking this morning, because certainly we want everybody to be thinking and wondering and learning about ChatGPT. At the same time, what's really important is the goal of getting those first-time appointments. And as you were just saying, if you throw out these key elements, it's not going to be successful regardless. Just like if you're picking up the phone and talking to someone, if you're inarticulate and not getting to the point, you're not going to have a successful call. So let's keep both of these things in mind.
Thanks, Deb. Okay, so let's see how ChatGPT stacks up. And we're going to start with probably the most straightforward and basic principle of effective email prospecting, and that's the importance of writing clearly. And given the importance of standing out in the inbox, there's a strong temptation to be clever, creative, and even gimmicky when it comes to email prospecting. But at BusinessWise, we're strong believers that clear trumps clever. And here's why. You're a sales rep reaching out to a prospect early in the process, at the very beginning of the process, in fact. They're not expecting your email. They may not even know about your company. You don't need to introduce any additional friction into the equation. If your prospect has to work to understand your email, then you've essentially lost them already. So you need to be as clear as possible. And that means eliminating business jargon and cliches. Your prospects may not know your own buzzwords, but they know plain regular English, and that's what you should use. And then finally, your goal here, as always, is to get your prospect to act on your email. And the clearer you are, the more likely your message will be to resonate. So let's put that into a ChatGPT prompt and see what happens. Now, for each of the prompts that I'll be using in today's session, I've attempted to select a particular B2B sector that's representative in some way. And here it's a commercial HVAC company. But the example might apply to other building services like janitorial, security, building automation, et cetera. And then the rest of the prompt is in line with what we just discussed. Prioritize clarity, reduce friction, avoid jargon, and strike a nerve with the prospect to generate a reply. And here's what ChatGPT came up with. I'm going to leave this up on the screen for the next few slides to talk through some of what we're looking at. But my first reaction is that this is really long. And as we'll discuss in the next section, length in many ways is the enemy of clarity. So we're not off to a great start. But to be fair, I did not ask ChatGPT to be concise, so let's look at how well it performed on the tasks I assigned it. In the highlighted sections here, it actually does a pretty good job of clearly stating the kinds of services that this company provides to its customers: enhancing comfort and reducing energy bills, improving your bottom line while also providing a comfortable environment. You can see the bullet points: energy efficient solutions, customized plans, reliable maintenance, and at the end, achieving a greener, more comfortable and cost-effective business environment. If I'm being overly critical, I might say that some of these descriptions are a little generic and cliched, but they're certainly clear. And I've already talked about the length, but putting on my editor hat, I wanted to point out a couple other aspects that stood out to me. The message starts out with a kind of weird and thus unnecessary line: "We hope this message finds you in great spirits." That right there is a bit of friction that might stop a prospect from reading further. And then, as you can see, the email is full of first-person references like "we" and "our team" that pull the focus away from the prospect's problems and put it on the seller's products and services. On a positive note, ChatGPT does frame the phone conversation here at the bottom that it's asking for as a chance to share insights and actionable advice with no obligation to take things further. That may not be the most artful sentence, but it's the right idea when it comes to cold prospecting. You're looking to give the prospect a reason to meet, even if they never become a client. We'll talk more about that later. And I think it's worth pausing here to remind ourselves that what we'll be looking at this morning is ChatGPT's first unedited attempt at following our instructions. And while it did some things poorly in this first assignment, it also did some things not so poorly that could serve as a starting point. So what grade does ChatGPT get for clarity? Well, I'm going to be generous and give it a B. I think despite the email's length, ChatGPT was relatively easy to understand and clearly highlighted those core products and services. I think it mostly avoided complicated jargon, even though it did use some buzzwords and cliches that lack substance. And then it overused for first-person framing, but it did provide info relevant to prospects with HVAC needs. And for each of these, I'm going to invite Deborah to offer her impressions. I think, a lot of this is going to be subjective. As prospects, when you receive an email, we act and read and digest the information for different reasons. And of course, to offer any other thoughts that we should keep in mind at this point. Deborah?
Thanks, Sam. We will be talking about length later, but one of the things that I wanted to mention is the length of your paragraphs. And the smaller your paragraph is, the more white space you get around it. And to me, that invites people to read. When I look at that first paragraph, I'm like, oh, I don't want to deal with this, and I don't want to read it.
Great. So let's move on to the next assignment. So up to now, we've talked about the importance of clarity in reducing friction and compelling action, but in the previous example, length was a real problem. So now let's ask, can ChatGPT get to the point? And for a lot of the same reasons we've already discussed, being concise in your prospecting emails is really critical. Once again, it reduces friction by reducing unnecessary words. That also has the effect of increasing clarity by making your message easier to read and your point easier to understand. And then when you make that extra effort to get right to the point, to tell your prospect why you're emailing and what you want them to do, you increase the odds that they'll take action. So here's our prompt, this time using a fictional employee benefits and outsourced HR company. And again, I'm being explicit about the top line priority as well as the underlying goals I'm trying to achieve. And then this time as a guardrail, I'm adding a line at the end to ensure some level of conciseness by keeping the message to 150 words or less. And here's what ChatGPT came up with. So at first glance, this may not look especially concise, but when you compare it with the first message from the previous section, it's certainly shorter. And in fact, it's only about 115 words, which is quite a bit less than the 150 word cap I gave ChatGPT in the prompt. Let's dig in a little. So the highlighted areas here are where I think it does a good job of getting to the point. It asks a question about HR related goals and challenges right at the beginning, sums up what the company offers. It's clear about its offer for a 30-minute consultation, and it's clear about the action it wants the prospect to take, a phone call the following week. As far as where it falls short, I found it sort of interesting that it included some unnecessary and repetitive fluff in an email where I asked it to get to the point. So the two highlighted sections here really don't add much to the email. They're just another way of saying what the company offers. And at the end, it's just a courtesy, a nicety, thanking the prospect for their time. And you can see that if I take those out, you really start to get somewhere in terms of getting to the point. Now, there are a lot of other things missing from this message that could make it stronger, and we'll get to those in a second. But hopefully you can see that brevity is a really critical piece of the puzzle when it comes to reducing friction, increasing clarity, and maximizing the odds of prospect action. Just looking this on the screen, as Deborah alluded to in her comment about white space, it's much more digestible. It's something you're much more likely to read and therefore more likely to act on. And since ChatGPT's output was pretty close to a usable message, I'm going to give it a B on getting to the point. As I mentioned, it got to the point despite using some of those unnecessary and redundant phrases and sentences. It was largely easy to understand and highlighted core products and services as in the first message. And then it was clear about the offer and next step, despite the fact that it waited until the end of the message to raise them. Deborah, what did you think about this one?
I agree with you that it's definitely better. What's missing to me are the benefits of the offer, and the offer has to do with the appointment.
Right, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. And of course, this raises one of the challenges that I mentioned at the beginning, that when you're prompting something like a generative AI tool, you really have to be as specific as possible as what you want it to do. If I was telling a human to write this message, they might intuitively understand that they need to come up with a benefit, but this computer program does not. And since I didn't say include a benefit in your offer, it didn't do it. But as far as brevity, you can see that it gets a lot closer. Okay, so now we're going to ramp up the difficulty a little bit and see if ChatGPT can take it to the next level. So being clear and concise are key principles of good writing, but the most successful sales prospectors don't stop there. They create opportunities for engagement by forging human connections. And this is a huge difference maker in email prospecting in particular, where so many emails lack that human touch and end up getting deleted before anyone even reads them. And it's pretty simple. When your prospects feel like there's a real person on the other side, they're going to be more likely to respond and engage. And as I just mentioned, human-sounding emails stand out in the inbox that's otherwise full of sort of robotic-sounding marketing emails. Since your goal is to start a conversation with another human, your email will be more successful if it sounds like it's part of that conversation, written in the way that humans converse, as opposed to being overly formal or full of jargon. In essence, it needs to feel real, like there might actually be a human sales rep on the other end that your prospect might benefit from engaging with. So here's our prompt. The top line goal, of course, is to sound as much like a human as possible. And the specific instructions are to avoid marketing speak, use friendly conversational language, and create the impression that there's a real person on the other end. And in this example, the fictional sender will be an outsourced IT company. And then once again, I'm using that 150-word cap to ensure some degree of brevity. And beep, boop, beep. Here's what ChatGPT comes up with. And you can see some of the ways it tried to follow my prompt. The highlighted areas here appear to be attempts at being friendly, conversational, and human. It uses an informal salutation. It says they recently stumbled upon the company and they're impressed with what they've built, which is a human comment. It uses sort of casual, sort of overly enthusiastic language, talking about creating an IT environment that's fantastic. And then it says, how about a quick chat sometime this week, which is a conversational way of prompting a further conversation. I don't think all of these hit the mark exactly, but you can see the intent. But if ChatGPT is trying to sound human, it's a pretty awkward human in this case. Phrases like, hope this message finds you in great spirits and your agenda will dictate the pace, to me sound more like an alien pretending to be human than anything that an actual human sales rep might say. And then this sentence in the middle, what if I told you that we can take the IT-related stresses off your hands, is a very cliched bit of marketing speak that goes against my initial instructions about sounding different in the inbox. But this one is pretty subjective, so I'm going to leave it up to all of you to decide what you think and how human you think it sounded. I mentioned, my reaction is that it used casual language, but ultimately fell back on common marketing cliches and awkward phrases. It succeeded in setting a conversational tone, but again, it was awkward in some places. But Deborah, what do you think? Do you think the message gave the impression that there was a real person on the other end or not?
Well, I guess the question would be, what kind of a real person? I am not a fan of, I stumbled across your business. I want to be more professional. I want to work with professionals. And I don't think I want a relationship because of a stumble. That may be me. And there are obviously every reader is different. And yet we don't know what the behavior style of the reader is. So I would always err on the side of caution.
It is interesting, and this question really gets at the heart of how far generative AI can go. I mean, we're talking about humans versus chatbots, and in this case, I think the best you can say is that it's in the eye of the beholder, but you can certainly find some things here that suggest that it is not an actual human sales rep with a genuine professional intent of having a conversation. Okay, so for our final task, we're going to turn to the bread and butter of sales prospecting, because it's not enough to be clear, concise, and sound human if what you're offering doesn't provide any benefit to your prospect in the moment. We've already sort of alluded to this in a couple of different ways, but we're going to get right at the heart of it. Remember, this is cold outreach to new prospects. They're very likely not thinking about buying anything at this point, and they may not even know that they have a problem that they need help with. And that means you shouldn't be looking to close any deals at this point. Your singular goal is to start a conversation that leads to an appointment. And in order to get your prospect to give you the answer you're looking for, you need to give them something in return. It's a transaction. If I offer my prospects something that helps them address their problems and priorities, they'll have a reason to reply, call, or click. And here are a few tips you can use to ensure you're offering value to your prospect. First, it's not about you, it's about your prospect. So always frame your offer or request in terms of how your prospect stands to benefit. Second, think about the insights and ideas that you can offer rather than the products and services you offer. What do you know that your prospect doesn't? How can you help address their problems and priorities? And then finally, in the context of setting an appointment, these insights and ideas are free, no strings attached. What does your prospect get from a meeting with you, even if they never become a client? And here's our final prompt using a B2B lead gen firm as a fictional seller. Again, the priority is to offer insights and value. The message should be framed in terms of how the prospect benefits, should focus on their problems and priorities, and it should provide a reason to meet, even if it never goes further. So cue ChatGPT. And honestly, there's really not much here in terms of any great insights or even the offer of insights in a future conversation. The highlighted areas here are really all I can pick out that even hint at a unique perspective. The importance of not finding just any leads, but the right leads that converted at a higher rate, still pretty weak. And then they hint at insights derived from market research, which could essentially mean anything and doesn't really set the sender apart in terms of unique perspective on the issues the prospect might be facing. And while the message starts out by highlighting the challenge the prospect might be facing, the email is totally stuck in the seller's perspective, despite the fact that I told it to frame it from the prospect's perspective. Again, you can see all the instances of we and us when the focus should be on you, the prospect. And then most glaringly, ChatGPT frames the meeting it's asking for here at the bottom as an opportunity for the sales rep to learn something from the prospect. We are eager to learn about the unique challenges faced by a prospect's company, rather than a chance for the prospect to learn from the seller, which is the whole point. And it's the exact opposite of what we're trying to achieve in terms of providing benefits, value, and a reason to act. So as a result, this one was a solid F for me and really shows why unique human insights will continue to be a major difference maker for successful sales prospectors in the world of generative AI and beyond. I think it highlighted the challenge, but again, remains stuck in the seller's perspective, didn't offer any really new insights that might be relevant to the prospect's problem and priorities, and again, failed to give the prospect a reason to act. And in a lot of ways, this is unfair. Our own human insights and experiences come from the things that we've done, the clients that we've worked for, the problems we've helped them solve. And these are things that ChatGPT hasn't done and can't do. And as I said, even though this is an F, I think in a lot of ways, it's a promising opportunity because it is a gap left to fill by sales reps who have these insights and ideas that their prospects can benefit from. Deborah, what was your sense on this one?
I agree with your grade, Sam. And at the same time, I think we all have to ask ourselves, are we stuck sometimes in the same rut that this ChatGPT writer is stuck? Are we thinking too much about ourselves and how much we would love to meet with our prospects rather than provide valuable ideas and insights for them? And I think we need to ask ourselves how we're doing in that area, and also think about that ChatGPT is getting this information from all the stuff that's out on the web. And I think that tells us that most sales and marketing efforts have it wrong. That, as you were saying, Sam, it's much too much from the I, we perspective rather than the you, our prospects perception.
Exactly. And I think, if I want you guys to take something away from this, I want it to be that if you come to this topic of whether ChatGPT or generative AI can help you write your emails from a perspective where you do not have a strong foundation, then the output is not going to be anywhere close to what needs to happen to help you set appointments. So to wrap up, and before we start the breakout groups, I wanted to leave you with a few questions to be thinking about. Some of them get at your own experiences using generative AI and whether you think it helps, hurts, or makes no difference to what you're trying to achieve. And then on the right side of this slide are some questions that encourage you to take a step back, as Deborah just suggested, and to look at your holistic approach to biz dev. Do you have a compelling offer and a focused list that provide the foundation for successful lead gen that we talked about earlier in the presentation? Again, think about your own unique insights and ideas and how you can use them to give prospects a reason to engage and meet with you. The exercise we ran through today showed only one tiny sliver of what generative AI tools can do. And I would encourage you to experiment with it because it's really interesting, if you have a strong foundation, how it might be able to refine and make your technique and approach more effective. And I hope you take away from the presentation that AI has strengths as well as weaknesses. Like all technological tools, it has real promise, but only in the hands of sales teams that have a strong new business development process that relies on providing value to the prospect in the form of those unique human insights and ideas. So there's a lot of food for thought in the discussion. And with that, thanks again to everyone for attending, and we will see you in the breakout rooms.